All right, get ready, because today we're going deep on India's space docking experiment, SpaDeX. You know, space docking, it sounds pretty sci-fi, but it's actually becoming super important for all our plans in space.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about 2 spacecraft orbiting Earth at crazy speeds, and they connect, like they become one. And get this, India just joined a really, exclusive club by launching SpaDeX successfully.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, only 3 other countries have ever done this: China, Russia, the US.
It's a really complicated thing to pull off engineering-wise. Right. So, yeah, this puts India in a whole new category when it comes to space.
Okay, so help me visualize this. What's happening with SpaDeX right now? I know the launch was from Sriharikota, but where are these spacecraft now? And what are they doing up there?
So right now there are 2 spacecraft. They're called Chaser and Target. Catchy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're orbiting Earth about 470 kilometers up. Each one weighs a hefty 220 kilograms. So they're, kind of doing this cosmic dance, getting ready for the main event, the actual docking, which should happen around January 7th.
Wow, no pressure, right? I mean, I bet even astronauts get nervous during those maneuvers. But before we get to that, I'm kind of curious, why is space docking such a big deal?
Well, you see, space docking, it's like the answer to a really big problem when you're trying to build things in space. Imagine building a space station piece by piece. While everything is whizzing around in orbit, it'd be like trying to build a ship in the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
So space docking lets us build these giant structures in orbit, refuel spacecraft without having to come back to Earth, even move astronauts and cargo between vehicles. All that stuff is crucial for long missions, lunar bases, space tourism even.
So it's not just about hooking 2 spacecraft together. It's about, opening up all these possibilities in space.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this isn't the first time we've seen space docking, right? Didn't the Soviets do this back in the 60s?
They did. It was a huge moment, actually, in space history. October 30th, 1967, the Soviets docked 2 unmanned spacecraft, Cosmos 186 and 188. Big step for their lunar landing program and their early space station plans.
Right, and that Soviet achievement, it led to some international collaboration, even during the Cold War. Just a few years later, the Apollo-Soyuz mission showed that space exploration could bring nations together, didn't it?
Totally. 1975, right in the middle of the Cold War, American and Soviet spacecraft docked in orbit. Powerful symbol of cooperation, proved that space exploration could be this unifying force.
Yeah, it really showed how, shared scientific goals can be bigger than political differences. But let's maybe shift gears a bit here. Talk about the technical side of space docking. I mean, docking spacecraft on Earth. In a controlled environment, it's one thing, but doing it in space, it's a whole different it's a whole other ball game.
No kidding. Trying to connect 2 vehicles, going thousands of kilometers an hour, no room for error. I mean, that's way beyond my parallel parking skills, for sure. It takes a crazy level of precision. The whole thing starts with what we call rendezvous. Basically, you got to get those 2 spacecraft close enough together. Using thrusters and orbital mechanics, it's like this delicate dance of carefully planned maneuvers. Each spacecraft has to adjust its speed and its trajectory to match the other ones, right? And they have to do all that while dealing with gravity from Earth and other stuff out there in space.
Right, so it's not just aiming one at the other. You have to really understand the physics of it all and manipulate them super precisely.
Exactly. And once they're close enough, things get even trickier. They use special docking systems, usually a probe and drogue setup. So the Chaser extends this probe, and it captures a cone-shaped thing called a drogue on the target.
Okay, so it's kind of like a cosmic handshake, but a lot more force involved, probably.
Yeah, you could say that. That first connection, it stabilizes things, pulls the spacecraft together, then latches engage to make a really strong airtight seal. And at that point, they're basically one spacecraft, sharing resources, power, even living space, if we're talking at a space station, for example.
I mean, the engineering involved in all of this, it's just mind-blowing. But space is not exactly a forgiving place. What are some of the, risks with space docking?
Well, the big one is collision. Even a tiny miscalculation during rendezvous, could lead to a pretty disastrous crash. So the engineers back on Earth, they monitor every single thing, every step of the process, ready to jump in if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I can only imagine how tense it must be in mission control.
Absolutely. But, luckily things have gotten a lot safer thanks to automation and better sensors. Spacecraft are more autonomous now. They can make adjustments in real time to avoid those collisions.
So it's like this combination of human expertise and really advanced tech that makes this all possible. But how does space docking fit into the bigger picture of space exploration?
Well, it's pretty fundamental, I'd say. For having a real human presence in space, I mean, think about it. Building huge, complicated things like space stations or lunar bases, it would be almost impossible without being able to connect modules together.
So it's like the difference between putting up a tent and building a skyscraper.
Yeah,
Space docking lets us think bigger when it comes to space.
exactly. And it's not just about construction either. Space docking opens up possibilities for deep space missions, for using resources on other planets or moons, even for commercial ventures. Imagine like having refueling stations in orbit or spacecraft that can change their configuration for different missions.
It sounds like space docking isn't just a cool piece of technology. It's like a whole new era of space exploration.
You got it. And that brings us back to India and their SpaDeX mission. It's not just about showing that they can dock, it's about, setting the stage for bigger goals they have in the future.
Right, like Chandrayaan-4, their mission to bring back samples from the moon, and their plans for their own space station, the Bharati Antariksh Station.
Exactly. SpaDeX is a stepping stone for all of that.
So would you say that SpaDeX is like a game changer for India's space program?
Mhm.
What doors does this mission specifically open?
Well, it's definitely a huge achievement. Puts them in a position to contribute more to the global space community. They're not just taking part anymore. They're developing and mastering the technologies that will really shape the future of space exploration.
Yeah, it really is inspiring to see how one mission can have such a big impact. But let's maybe focus back in on SpaDeX itself. What's unique about this mission compared to other docking missions in the past?
Well, what ISRO is doing here, it's really smart. They're maximizing the value of the whole mission. Remember those secondary objectives we talked about?
Yeah.
Those are all about doing a bunch of different experiments after the docking is done.
Right. So they're using those docked spacecraft as a platform for experiments, gathering all kinds of data while they're up there in orbit. It's like getting twice the science for one launch.
Exactly. They're testing things like transferring power between the two vehicles, and they're doing experiments with payloads from startups and companies and universities.
So SpaDeX is not just about India and their space program. It's about helping the whole scientific community, encouraging innovation and collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows how creative ISRO is and how committed they are to pushing the boundaries of space exploration, both the technology and, working together.
It's pretty amazing to think about all these incredible things happening in our lifetime, from those first kind of tentative attempts to dock spacecraft to the plans we have now for lunar bases, space stations. It's a whole new era for space exploration.
And it all comes back to that basic human urge to explore, to build, to see how far we can go. Space docking, it really embodies that spirit, It reminds us that we're not stuck here on Earth. We can reach out and connect in the vastness of space.
It's a future full of possibilities, and missions like SpaDeX are leading the way. So as we wrap up our deep dive here, let's just take a second to appreciate all the ingenuity, the teamwork, the sheer, audacity of what humans can achieve. That's what makes space docking possible. And keep your eyes peeled for updates on SpaDeX. That historic docking is coming up soon. And until then, keep exploring the cosmos.